The desert stretched without end, golden waves of sand shimmering under the burning sun. To most, it was only emptiness, a place of silence and forgotten bones. But hidden beneath those dunes lay something that had waited longer than kingdoms, longer than dynasties. A colossal warship, once the pride of a human fleet, rested half-buried and broken. Its hull was scarred by battles 5 centuries old. Its shadow lay across the sand like the skeleton of a god. For generations, travelers spoke of it in whispers, calling it cursed, holy, or both. They believed it had a soul, one that would never wake until its true commander returned. One night, the silence broke. The ship stirred. A deep pulse of blue light escaped from the cracks in its hull, rising into the sky like a signal flare. The dunes shook, and the desert's people saw the glow from miles away. Traders stopped their caravans. Children pointed at the heavens. Elders whispered prayers they had not spoken in years. They remembered the legend. The warship had not died. It had only been waiting. Centuries before, the galaxy had been torn apart by war. Humans, a young species, had risen faster than anyone expected. Their ships were small compared to alien armadas, but they carried determination that terrified their enemies. The warship in the desert had once led the charge, commanded by a figure whose name was spoken with both fear and hope, the Admiral. He had fought against empires that thought humans weak. He had broken fleets that claimed to be eternal. But in the chaos of the final battle, the ship vanished. Both allies and enemies believed it destroyed. Yet here it was, 500 years later, alive. On the edge of the desert, a young wanderer named Kale saw the light. He had grown up hearing the stories, laughing at them, dismissing them as tales for children. But as the horizon burned with strange colors and the ground trembled beneath his feet, his heart pounded with something more than fear. It felt like the world itself was calling him. Against the warnings of his friends, he rode into the dunes, guided by the glow. When he reached the wreck, he froze. The warship towered over him, massive even in ruin, its jagged hull half buried in golden sand. Blue lines of energy crawled across the metal like veins, pulsing steadily, as if the ship were breathing. The air smelled of iron and storms. Kale stepped closer, his legs shaking, until his hand brushed the surface. Sparks leapt across his skin. For a moment he saw visions, battles among the stars, alien fleets torn apart, human soldiers fighting with desperate courage. He saw the Admiral standing tall, his figure burning with command. Then the vision vanished, leaving Kale gasping for air. The villagers who had followed him watched in silence. They saw the ship respond to him. They saw symbols flare to life across its hull, glowing brighter where his hand touched. The desert. Air rang with a voice, deep and ancient, echoing from the warship itself. It spoke words in a language older than Kale's world, but somehow he understood. Commander confirmed, awaiting orders. Kale stumbled back, terrified. He was no commander, he was no soldier. Yet the ship's voice did not falter. The massive. Doors on its side began to groan open, sand sliding away as the passage revealed itself. A staircase of light unfolded into the desert. The villagers fell to their knees, some whispering that the prophecy had come true, others crying out that the warship had chosen its master. Kale could only stand there, trembling, as the desert roared with destiny. Inside the ship, systems long dormant began to awaken. Screens lit up with images of old battles. Artificial intelligence protocols ran through their cycles, recalibrating, preparing. The ship had waited patiently for centuries, but now it burned with readiness. Its beacon spread outward into the stars. A signal carried across space. Ancient enemies detected it. Old warnings flashed red in forgotten archives. Far from the desert, warlords, rulers, and hunters turned their eyes toward the tiny world. The Zeth Dominion, an empire of cruel strength, was the first to notice. Their warlord, a creature of bone and steel, watched the signal pulse on his screens. His teeth curled into a grin. For centuries they had searched for the Terran warship, the last ghost of the Admiral. If it had truly awakened, then the galaxy would bleed again. He ordered his fleets to move. Back in the desert, Kale hesitated at the entrance. Every instinct told him to run. But something deeper pulled him forward. He stepped inside, his footsteps echoing through vast corridors lit by pale blue light. The air was stale, heavy with the weight of centuries, yet alive with energy. He felt watched, guided, tested. The ship's voice followed him through every step. "Commander, systems await your command." Kale whispered that he was not the Admiral, that there had been some mistake. But the ship did not listen. It showed him more visions, the war that had once engulfed the stars, the destruction, the victory, the silence. Then it showed him something more, a future where war would rise again, and only the warship could stand against it. The desert outside was silent again, but the galaxy was not. Fleets had already begun to move. The warship had awakened, and nothing would ever be the same. The warship's corridors stretched endlessly, metal walls glowing with faint blue veins of light. Kale walked slowly, his footsteps echoing like he had entered a temple of ghosts. Every surface hummed with energy, alive after 5 centuries of silence. He felt small inside it, like a wanderer who had stepped into the bones of a sleeping giant. Yet the ship seemed to know him. Lights flickered on ahead of his steps, guiding him deeper, as though welcoming its commander home. Behind him, the villagers hesitated at the threshold. Some bowed low, refusing to follow, too afraid of the stories. Others whispered that Kale was chosen by destiny, and they dared not disturb it. A few brave ones stepped inside, their eyes wide as they stared at the living walls. None of them understood why the ship had awakened now, or why it called Kale its commander. But none could deny what they had seen. The ship recognized him. Kale's voice trembled as he spoke to the empty halls. "I'm not your Admiral, you've made a mistake." His words faded into the metallic air, but the ship answered anyway. Identity confirmed. Genetic link acceptable. Command protocols restored. He froze. Genetic link. Somewhere in his blood, the ship had found a match. Somewhere in his family line, perhaps forgotten across centuries, the Admiral's blood had survived. Kale realized then why he had been chosen. It was not a mistake, it was inheritance. The ship's systems unfolded around him. Images bloomed across the walls, maps of stars, data streams, the history of a war long ended. Kale saw flashes of humanity's rise, how they fought impossible battles against larger empires. He saw the Admiral standing proud on the bridge, leading fleets into chaos, his voice carrying commands with certainty. The humans had once been feared, respected, hated. And then they had been forgotten, scattered across the galaxy as if erased. But the warship had never forgotten. It had obeyed its final command. Wait. Now that Kale had awakened it, it was ready again. In distant space, alien warlords studied the beacon. The Zeth Dominion moved first, sending their fastest raiding fleet. They wanted to claim the warship for themselves, or destroy it before humans rose again. The Dominion had suffered greatly in the past war. They remembered the Admiral too well. To them, Kale's awakening was not prophecy but danger. Kale stood at the central chamber, a room filled with ancient consoles and glowing screens. Dust fell away as systems came online. A holographic figure flickered before him, an echo of the Admiral, recorded centuries earlier. The image was tall, dressed in dark uniform, eyes burning with fierce will. The hologram spoke with authority. "If you are seeing this, then I am gone, but the ship remains. It has chosen you to continue. Lead it well. The galaxy will need you." Kale's heart pounded. He wanted to run. He was no leader, no soldier. But the weight of the warship pressed on him. The villagers outside already believed he was chosen. The ship itself refused to accept his denial. And now, the galaxy beyond was stirring. Suddenly, the ship's alarms blared. Symbols flashed red on the screens. The voice of the AI echoed through the chamber. Incoming hostile fleet detected. Estimated time to orbit, 3 cycles. Kale stared in horror. He had only just touched the ship, and already enemies were coming. He whispered, "I can't fight them." But the ship replied coldly, "You must." Weapons await command. In the desert, the villagers saw the sky streak with strange lights. Caravans scattered, people ran, but some stayed, staring at Kale as though salvation rested on his shoulders. They called him Admiral, believing the prophecy had returned in flesh. Kale clenched his fists. He had no choice. Whether he was ready or not, the ship had bound itself to him. He placed his hand on the console. Lights surged. Across the hull, cannons long buried in sand rose into position. Shields shimmered around the wreck. The desert air shook with power. Above the planet, the Zeth Dominion fleet closed in, their ships sharp like blades, hungry for blood. They had come to destroy the last ghost of humanity. But as they approached, they saw the warship stir from its grave. For 500 years, it had slept. Now its weapons burned with blue fire. Kale's voice broke as he spoke the words, "Defend this world." The ship obeyed. The desert exploded with light as the first battle in 5 centuries began. The night sky above the desert burned with streaks of fire as enemy ships entered orbit. Their dark hulls glimmered against the stars, wings spread wide like predators circling prey. The villagers on the sands cried out, some dropping to their knees in terror, others running for caves carved into the cliffs. For generations they had told stories about the cursed ship. Now those stories had come alive, and war had descended on their quiet world. Inside the warship, Kale's heart hammered in his chest. The floor trembled beneath his feet as the ship fully awakened. Metal groaned, shields flared, and weapons, long buried deep under dunes, rose into the air. Turrets hummed with power, their barrels glowing faint blue. Kale felt his body shaking. He had never commanded anything in his life, yet the ship responded to him as though he were born for this moment. The voice of the AI echoed around him. Hostile fleet confirmed. 18 ships. Preparing engagement. Awaiting orders. Kale swallowed hard. 18 ships against one ancient vessel. He thought it was impossible. But when his hands rested on the glowing console, visions filled his mind. He saw firing angles, shield layers, weak points of the enemy. The warship did not only obey him. It taught him. Above, the Zeth Dominion fleet closed in. Their leader, Warlord Scar, sneered as he studied the readings. His claws tapped the edge of his command chair. "The ghost of the Admiral stirs," he growled. "We will crush it and bury humanity forever." His fleet opened fire, beams of green energy raining down through the atmosphere. The desert shook. Sand rose like waves as explosions thundered around the ship. Villagers screamed, clinging to each other. Kale's vision blurred from the impact, but the IS voice cut through the chaos. "Shield stable, retaliate now." Kale raised his hand. The ship obeyed. From the buried hull, blue lances of light erupted upward. They tore through the sky, striking 2 Dominion cruisers. One exploded instantly, scattering burning fragments across the horizon. The other spun out of control, its wings snapping apart before it vanished in fire. The villagers gasped. For centuries, the ship had been silent. Now it roared like a god of war. Kale stood frozen. He had destroyed ships with a thought. His stomach churned. He had never wanted power, but power had taken him. The villagers outside were no longer whispering in fear. They were shouting his name. To them, Kale was no longer a wanderer. He was their Admiral reborn. The battle raged. Enemy ships swarmed. Above, firing beams that lit the desert in green and gold. The warship answered with thunder, blue fire cutting through the sky, each shot guided by Kale's instincts. The ship amplified his thoughts, sharpened his reactions, made him something more than human. One by one, enemy ships fell, their flames raining across the desert like falling stars. But the enemy was not weak. Scar's flagship dove through the atmosphere, cannons blazing. Its shadow fell across the dunes like a mountain of steel. The warship trembled under the assault. Sparks rained from the ceilings inside, consoles flickering. Cale stumbled, blood running from a cut on his forehead. The AI's voice remained calm, shields at 60%. Hull integrity compromised. Cale clenched his fists. He could not falter. Not while the villagers watched, not while the galaxy listened to the beacon. He shouted, "All weapons, fire!" The warship unleashed everything. Beams, missiles, bursts of energy long unseen erupted from its sides. The desert became a sea of fire and thunder. Scar's flagship twisted and roared, shields collapsing under the barrage. In a final strike, Cale guided a lance of blue light straight through its core. The flagship exploded, its fragments scattering across the sky. Silence followed. The villagers stared at the burning remains of the Dominion fleet. The desert glowed with falling embers. For the first time in centuries, the warship had spoken with its guns. And it had won. Cale collapsed to his knees, his body trembling from exhaustion. The AI spoke softly. Victory achieved, enemy fleet destroyed. Further hostiles incoming in future cycles. Recommend preparation. Cale's stomach twisted. This was only the beginning. The beacon had called more than one enemy. High above the galaxy, other powers had already seen the signal. Old rivals of humanity debated in council chambers. Some feared the Admiral's return. Others hungered for the warship's power. Fleets began to mobilize, worlds began to prepare, and whispers spread in every tongue. The humans had returned. Cale looked at the villagers who bowed before him, their voices crying out in worship. He wanted to tell them he was not their admiral, that he was only a boy who had touched a ship. But their eyes burned with faith, and his words caught in his throat. Whether he wished it or not, the galaxy believed the Admiral had come back. The warship's AI spoke once more. "Commander, we wait for your orders. The galaxy moves. You must decide." Cale stared into the glowing screens, his reflection mixed with the image of the Admiral from centuries past. The line between them blurred. The desert was quiet again, but destiny was not. The warship had awakened, and war would come. The desert. Winds carried the smell of burned metal for days after the battle. Broken fragments of the Dominion ship still lay scattered across the sands, half buried by drifting dunes. Children of the village climbed them in awe, pointing at the melted scars where the warship's fire had torn through. Elders whispered that history had turned back, that the Admiral had returned. Cale could not escape their eyes. Everywhere he walked, people bowed to him. To them, he was not Cale the Wanderer anymore. He was the commander chosen by the ship, but inside his heart, doubt gnawed. Each night he stood in the command chamber, staring at the ghostly image of the Admiral, projected by the ship. The hologram looked so certain, so strong. Cale felt like a shadow standing in that light. "I am not you," he whispered to the empty hull. Yet the eye answered in the same calm tone. "The blood remembers. The command remains." Lysera, the alien envoy, walked the halls beside him now. The villagers feared her, for her kind had once fought against the humans. But she moved with quiet confidence, unafraid of their stares. Cale watched her carefully, never sure if she was ally or spy. "Why help me?" he asked one night as they studied the star maps glowing across the chamber. She tilted her head, her silver cloak catching the light. "Because the galaxy is not ready for what is coming. The Dominion was only the first. If you fall, all others will follow. My people would rather see balance than fire. For now, that means standing with you." Kale did not know if he believed her, but he had no choice. The next threat was already on its way. The eye showed him the approaching fleets, not one, but three. Each from a different empire. Each sworn enemy of humanity from ages past. The beacon had awoken them all. They came not as allies to one another, but as hunters drawn to the same prey. Kale's hands curled into fists. We cannot fight them. All. The IS voice replied, calm as ever. This warship was built to face entire armadas, but it cannot do so alone. Reinforcements are required. Kale frowned. What reinforcements? Humanity is gone. For the first time, Lysera spoke with something close to a smile. Not gone, scattered, hiding, forgotten. The blood of your kind still survives across the stars. The beacon did not only call enemies, some heard it as a signal of hope. Her words struck him harder than any weapon. Could there still be humans out there, lost but alive? Could the warship's signal bring them back? Kale felt a fire in his chest. For the first time, he did not see himself only as a boy caught in destiny. He saw a path forward. If humanity still lived, even in fragments, he had to find them. The AI shifted the maps, showing faint responses to the beacon. Weak signals scattered across distant systems. Possible human survivors. Kale touched the console, his eyes fixed. We will find them, he said. The AI responded, course plotted. But caution, hostile fleets will arrive before search can begin. Priority must be defense. Kale turned to Lysera. Then help me. Stand with us when they come. She met his gaze with sharp, unreadable eyes. If I fight beside you, I cannot return to my people. They will call me traitor. Kale's voice grew firm. Then choose. Because the war is coming whether you want it or not. The desert trembled again the next night as lights appeared in the sky. The villagers screamed, pointing upward. 3 fleets descended through the atmosphere, their shapes blotting out the stars. Each bore a different symbol of an empire that had once sworn to erase humanity. Their ships spread across the horizon, surrounding the desert world like a cage of fire. Kale stood at the command console, his jaw tight. The ship's weapons hummed, waiting for his order. But this was not the same as before. 1 fleet had been a test. 3 fleets were impossible. Yet the villagers' voices outside reached him. They sang old chants calling him Admiral, begging him to protect them. He could not turn away. The IS voice echoed through the chamber. Enemy fleets preparing bombardment. Recommendation: strike first. Kale closed his eyes. Fear threatened to choke him, but he forced it down. When he opened his eyes again, they burned with something new, resolve. Then we strike. The warship roared to life. Cannons lifted from the dunes, glowing brighter than the sun's. Shields shimmered around its hull. The desert itself seemed to quake under its awakening. Lysera placed her hand on Kale's arm. If you fall here, there will be nothing left to save. He nodded. Then I will not fall. Above, the first barrage of enemy fire rained down, green and red streaks cutting through the night sky. The warship answered with blue fire that split the heavens apart. The second great battle in 5 centuries had begun, and the desert asterisk, the sky above the desert, split with fire. 3 enemy fleets rained their weapons down, beams and missiles painting the night in green and red. The villagers clung to each other, their voices drowned by the roar of war. The ground trembled beneath their feet as Kale's warship rose, shields burning bright against the storm. Inside the command chamber, Kale stood at the console, his hands pressed to the glowing surface. The ship's systems responded instantly, visions of the battlefield flooding his mind. He saw every angle, every enemy formation, as if he had been trained for years. The AI spoke calmly. Shields at 80%. Enemy bombardment intensifying. Kale gritted his teeth. Then we give them something to fear. Blue lances of light erupted from the ship's cannons, slicing through the sky. One enemy destroyer exploded in a burst of flame, its wreckage scattering across the horizon. Another ship staggered under the assault, its wings breaking apart as it spiraled into the desert. The villagers cried out as the heavens burned. For the first time, they were not helpless. Their admiral had answered, but the enemy did not break. The three fleets moved in unison, their commanders knowing they could not let the warship rise again. Dozens of cruisers dove through the atmosphere, firing in coordinated strikes. Explosions shook the desert, sand rising in waves that swallowed. Tents in caravans. Kale staggered as sparks rained from the ceiling. The AI's voice cut through the chaos. Shields at 50%. Hull damage detected. Kale's chest tightened. One ship against three fleets was madness. Yet he could not retreat. Not while the villagers looked to him, not while the galaxy watched. He shouted, "Target their flagships. Cut off their leaders." The warship obeyed. Guided by Kale's instincts, it unleashed concentrated fire on the largest vessels. The first flagship groaned under the assault, its shields collapsing in a cascade of sparks before it detonated in brilliant light. The second wavered, pulling back, but Kale pressed harder, striking until its engines failed and it fell from the sky like a burning star. Lysera stood beside him, her silver eyes wide. "You fight like your ancestor," she whispered. "The Admiral's blood truly burns in you." Kale shook his head, sweat dripping down his face. "I'm not him. I'm just trying to keep us alive." Yet even as he said it, part of him felt the truth. He was becoming more than he had ever believed. The last enemy flagship descended low over the desert, its weapons blazing. Villagers screamed as its shadow swallowed their homes. Kale raised his hand, channeling everything the warship gave him. "Now!" he shouted. The ship unleashed a storm of blue fire, piercing the enemy's heart. The flagship erupted in flame, its wreck falling into the dunes with a thunderous crash. For a moment, silence returned. The villagers cheered, their voices echoing across the sands. They had seen the impossible. The warship, their guardian, had stood against three fleets and survived. Kale collapsed into the command chair, his body trembling. The AI's voice was steady. Victory achieved. Casualties minimal. Structural integrity at 60%. Kale closed his eyes, relief flooding him. But Lysera did not smile. She stared at the star maps glowing across the chamber. "This is only the beginning," she said softly. "More will come. They will not stop until the ship is ashes." The AI confirmed her words. Signals detected. Multiple empires converging. Estimated time of arrival, 20 cycles. Kale opened his eyes. 20 cycles. Only a short span before the galaxy itself arrived at his door. But there was more. Among the streams of data, faint signals pulsed back. Not red enemy markers, but blue ones. Weak, scattered, distant. The AI spoke. Possible human colonies. Responding to beacon. Survival probability confirmed. Kale's breath caught. He leaned forward, staring at the signals. There were humans out there. Not myths, not whispers, but real survivors who had heard the call. His heart pounded. Humanity had not been erased. They were waiting, just as the warship had waited. Lysera's voice was sharp. "Then you must move. Find them. Unite them. If you stand alone, you will be crushed. But if your people rise again, the galaxy will not stand against you." Kale looked at her, then at the glowing image of the Admiral projected before him. The hologram's eyes were hard, filled with certainty. For the first time, Kale did not shrink beneath that gaze. He felt it within himself, now the same fire. He stood, his voice steady. "We will not wait for them to come to us. We will take this ship back to the stars. We will find our people. And when the galaxy comes, humanity will not be scattered. and forgotten, we will stand together." The villagers outside raised their voices as if they felt his decision through the walls of steel. They shouted his name, calling him Admiral, calling him Commander. For the first time, Kale did not deny it. He accepted it. The desert warship, silent for 5 centuries, now roared with life. Its engines burned, shaking the sands as it rose. Higher into the sky, the villagers watched with awe as the massive vessel lifted free from the dunes that had held it prisoner. Above, the stars seemed to brighten, as if welcoming it home. Kale stood at the bridge, his eyes locked on the endless void. The galaxy was moving against him, but humanity's blood was not gone. He would find them. He would awaken them. And when the storm came, the Admiral's legacy would rise again. The warship turned its gaze to the stars, engines blazing. The journey had begun. The desert that had held the warship for 500 years lay quiet once more. Only broken wreckage and blackened craters remained to mark the battles. But the ship itself was gone, its engines blazing as it carried Kale into the endless dark. Of the stars, for the villagers, it was both loss and triumph. They had seen their guardian rise. They had seen the Admiral return. On the bridge, Kale stood tall, though his body still ached from the strain of battle. The stars stretched before him, countless points of light. The AIA's voice guided him. Course locked. Destination, nearest human signal. Estimated travel, 6 cycles. Kale's eyes burned with determination. He was no longer the wanderer who had stumbled into a legend. He was commander of the last great warship, and his duty was clear. Lysera remained at his side, silent but watchful. She had chosen her path when she stayed with him. To her people, she was now a traitor, but she did not waver. "You understand," she said quietly, "that the galaxy will not stop. They will come together, every empire, to crush you." Kale nodded. "Then we give them something worth fearing again." Days turned into cycles as the warship crossed the void. Along the way, Kale trained without rest. The ship fed knowledge into him, strategies, histories, memories of the Admiral before him. He learned to think faster, to see the flow of battles before they began. Yet he did not lose himself in the shadow of the past. He shaped his own voice, his own command. The villagers who had joined him in fear now followed him in loyalty, taking roles within the ship, learning its systems. A crew was forming, one bound not by rank but by faith. Then, at last, the first human signal drew close. A barren moon appeared, dotted with settlements clinging to survival. When Kale's ship arrived, the settlers stared in disbelief. Many had never seen a Terran warship, only heard whispers that such things had once existed. To them, Kale was like a ghost stepping out of history. They gathered at the landing sites, their voices trembling with awe as they called him Admiral. Kale looked at their faces, worn by hardship, but still carrying the fire of his kind. His heart swelled. Humanity was not gone. It was waiting to be led. More signals followed. Colony after colony, scattered survivors answered the beacon. Some were fearful, reluctant to rise again, but Kale spoke to them with a voice that was no longer unsure. He told them of the coming storm, of the fleets already moving against them. He told them of the warship that had slept for 500 years, and of the bloodline it had chosen to awaken. One by one, the colonies pledged themselves. What had been scattered fragments now began to unite, but the galaxy did not remain idle. When Kale's warship entered the rim systems, the storm finally broke. Dozens of alien fleets converged, a wall of firepower stretching across the stars. Warlords, empires, councils, enemies who had once sworn to erase humanity had set aside their rivalries for one purpose: to crush the Admiral's return before it grew unstoppable. The warship stood alone at first, a single titan against a sea of enemies. Kale looked at the endless swarm and felt the old fear return. But then, His sensors lit up with signals blue this time, not red. Ships jumped into the system one after another. Small patched freighters, outdated cruisers, civilian crafts refitted for war. They were not strong individually, but together they formed something greater. Humanity had come. The scattered children of Earth had returned to stand with him. The enemy hailed him. A chorus of voices filled the comms. Human, surrender your ship. End this before blood is spilled again. Kale stood tall on the bridge, his voice steady and clear. You buried us. You thought we would fade, but humanity does not fade. We endure, and now we rise. The fleets opened fire. Space lit with storms of energy, missiles, beams, and burning trails. The warship answered with fury, its ancient weapons carving through the front lines. Human ships followed, fighting with reckless courage, their small crafts darting into impossible gaps, striking like knives. The battle became chaos, a storm of fire across the stars. Kale commanded with growing certainty. He saw the flow, moved his forces where the enemy was weakest, shielded his allies where the fight was hardest. Every order he gave carried the weight of history. Every strike reminded the galaxy of what humans were. Lysera fought at his side, her people's weapons now turned against those who hunted him. Together, they carved a path through the storm. When the dust finally cleared, the enemy fleets were shattered. Not destroyed, but broken enough to retreat. They had thrown everything into crushing humanity's return and failed. The galaxy trembled with the truth. The Admiral's warship lived. Humanity had risen again. On the bridge, Kale stood in silence, staring at the field of wreckage drifting among the stars. His chest rose with heavy breaths, his hands shaking from the strain, but his eyes burned with unshakable fire. It is done, he said softly. The eye answered. Victory confirmed. Humanity restored. The human survivors cheered across the channels, voices rising together for the first time in centuries. Villagers, colonists, wanderers, now they were no longer scattered. They were a people again. And they had a leader. Kale looked into the endless void, his reflection merging with the image of the Admiral still glowing on the screens. For 500 years the warship had waited. Now it had its commander. The galaxy would never forget. Again why humans were feared. The desert warship, once a tomb, was now a banner of rebirth. And under its shadow, humanity began its second rise.